You don't know what silence really is until you've drifted unprotected through the vacuum of space. There is no rushing wind, no dramatic swelling symphony, just a profound, absolute nothing pressing against your eardrums right before the cold boils the moisture from your lungs. Cole remembered that nothingness. He remembered the heavy, crushing dark. So when he finally woke to the smell of sterile chemicals and the rhythmic humming of machinery, his first thought wasn't that he was saved. It was that hell had a surprisingly clinical waiting room. Pain was the first thing to return. It didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in slowly, a creeping tide of fire and crushed glass moving from his extremities inward. Cole tried to open his eyes, but his eyelids felt like they were sealed shut with industrial adhesive. He forced them apart, tearing the crusted sleep or whatever it was from his lashes. The light above him was a harsh, unforgiving white that burned his retinas. He snapped his eyes shut again, groaning. The sound that escaped his throat was a pathetic, raspy wheeze. It felt like someone had dragged a rusted pipe cleaner down his windpipe. Heart rate is elevating. Neurological pathways are firing. He is conscious. This is not possible. The voice didn't come from the room. It came from inside his head or right next to his ear. It was a synthetic flat tone, perfectly unaccented. Cole tried to swallow, finding his mouth devoid of any moisture. He tasted old copper and bile. He managed to crack his eyes open a fraction, squinting through the blinding glare. The ceiling wasn't tiled. It was a smooth, seamless expanse of pearlescent material that seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. He tried to move his arms. They were heavy, pinned down, not by straps, but by a dense, invisible pressure. A localized gravitational field. He was lying on a surgical table, but he couldn't feel cold metal or crisp sheets beneath him. He was suspended about 2 inches above the surface, resting on a cushion of manipulated air and static electricity. It made the hairs on his arms stand up. Shadows moved across the blinding ceiling light. Figures stepped into his field of vision. Cole blinked rapidly, trying to clear the blur from his eyes. When the figures finally came into focus, his breath hitched, setting off a fresh wave of agony in his chest. They weren't human. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, impossibly slender, their bodies encased in smooth grey biosuits that looked grown rather than manufactured. They possessed elongated limbs with an extra joint in the arm, and their heads were elongated, tapering to a rounded point. 4 completely black, bulbous eyes studied him with insectoid intensity. The mandibles around their mouths clicked and whirred. As the taller of the 2 beings clattered its mandibles, a sharp pinch at the side of Cole's neck flared. A small metal collar rested tightly against his collarbone. The auditory translator is engaged. The synthetic voice whispered in his ear, perfectly syncing with the creature's clicking. "I am Dr. Hayes. To my right is Specialist Reed. Do not attempt to move your structural support system. You are currently held together by biogel and localized stasis fields." Cole stared. "Dr. Hayes." The translator was automatically assigning them the most culturally familiar names from his own linguistic databanks to prevent cognitive dissonance. It was a standard protocol for deep space recovery units, but hearing a giant grey mantis creature introduce itself as Hayes was deeply surreal. "Where?" Cole started. The word scraped against his vocal cords. He coughed a violent rattling sound that sent spikes of white-hot pain through his ribs. The 2 aliens recoiled. Actually physically recoiled. Specialist Reed took 3 steps back, its upper arms crossing over its chest in a defensive posture. "The atmospheric expulsion was violent." Reed clicked the translator, rendering the tone as alarmed. "Doctor, the internal pressure of his respiratory organs just spiked to dangerous levels." "Is he going to rupture?" "Negative," Hayes replied. though the creature maintained a safe distance. The internal sensors indicate this is a reflex, a cough. He is forcefully expelling micro-debris and dead tissue from his air-processing sacs. "He is doing it intentionally," Reed asked, sounding horrified. "His autonomic nervous system is doing it. The organism is highly volatile." Cole sucked in a ragged breath, ignoring them for a moment as the memories rushed back. The Demeter, the deep space mining rig, the proximity alarm screaming in the dark, a rogue asteroid fragment, no larger than a fist moving at 30,000 miles an hour. It had punched through the hull of the mess hall like a sniper bullet through wet paper. He remembered the explosive decompression, the deafening roar of the air being sucked into the void. Jenkins had been sitting right next to the breach. He didn't even have time to scream before he was pulled through the jagged metal hole, his body contorting as it was squeezed through a gap half his size. Sarah had grabbed a table, her knuckles white, her eyes wide with sheer terror. Cole had lunged for the emergency bulkheads, slamming his hand against the manual override. The doors had slammed shut, but the structural integrity of the sector was already compromised. The bulkhead buckled, the warning lights strobed in blinding red. Then, the terrible, silent cold. "My crew." Cole forced the words out his voice, a gravelly whisper. He turned his head to look directly at the alien called Hayes. The Demeter. Sarah. Jenkins. The four black eyes blinked independently. "You are referring to your fellow organic units aboard the kinetic fractured vessel." "Yes," Cole rasped. "Where are they?" Dr. Hayes glanced at Specialist Reed. The silence stretched, filled only by the soft melodic chiming of the alien life support monitors. "We detected the wreckage of your vessel 72 of our planetary cycles ago," Hayes finally said. "Your pod and emergency airlock section was heavily damaged. The atmosphere inside had vented completely. The ambient temperature was absolute zero. You were the only biological mass recovered with any residual spark of neural activity." Cole closed his eyes. The white light no longer bothered him. The darkness behind his eyelids was far heavier. Gone. They were all gone. The blue-collar haulers he had spent the last 3 years with, sharing cheap rations, complaining about corporate pay scales, playing cards in the cramped galley. Jenkins, who had a daughter back on Mars. Sarah, who was saving up to buy her own freighter. Dust. Frozen meat floating in the indifferent void. A heavy, suffocating weight pressed down on Cole's chest, and it wasn't the gravity field. It was grief, raw and suffocating. The heart monitor chiming next to him began to change, pitch, accelerating. "Doctor, look at the chemical readouts," Reed clicked frantically. "His brain chemistry is radically altering. High concentrations of cortisol and epinephrine are flooding his circulatory system. His neural pathways are firing in chaotic, highly localized storms. He is experiencing emotional distress," Hayes observed, stepping closer, holding a datapad that projected a 3-dimensional hologram of Cole's body. "Fascinating. The psychological trauma is triggering a physical defense mechanism. But without a physical threat, the chemicals are simply circulating. It is a wildly inefficient and dangerous biological design." Cole opened his eyes. He didn't have the energy to cry, and he severely doubted his tear ducts were functional anyway. He just felt hollowed out. A husk. "Why am I alive?" Cole asked softly. It wasn't a philosophical question. He genuinely wanted to know the mechanics of his survival. He had been in the void. He remembered his blood, feeling like it was turning to carbonated ice. Dr. Hayes adjusted a dial on the side of the medical table. "That human is the question that has consumed my entire medical staff for the past 2 cycles. By all known laws of biology across the 4 sectors, you should be completely, irreversibly dead." The hologram floating above Dr. Hayes's datapad expanded, filling the space between them. It was a perfect, glowing blue replica of Cole's skeletal and muscular structure. It was mapped with hundreds of bright red and yellow markers. Cole stared at his own anatomy. He looked like a Christmas tree lit up in warning lights. "Your species," Hayes began, pacing around the edge of the suspension field, "is entirely reliant on a delicate balance of water calcium and organic tissue. You have no exoskeleton. You have no redundant secondary nervous system. Your organs are housed in a single, easily punctured cavity." "Yeah, we're fragile," Cole muttered, staring at the ceiling. "Get to the point, Doc. Fragile." Specialist Reed interjected, its mandibles snapping in a rapid rhythm. The translator caught a note of sheer disbelief. "Human fragile is a crystalline lattice shattering under pressure. Fragile is a bioform expiring from a 2-degree temperature fluctuation. You are not fragile. You are a biological paradox." Hayes manipulated the hologram, zooming in on Cole's torso. "When we pulled you from the wreckage, your core temperature had dropped to fatal levels. Your bodily fluids had partially crystallized. You suffered 47 microfractures in your skeletal support structure from kinetic impacts. Your outer dermal layer was heavily burned by unshielded cosmic radiation. Your lungs had collapsed." Cole listened to the laundry list of his own destruction. It made sense. He felt like he had been put through an industrial rock crusher. Any one of these traumas would result in immediate, catastrophic system failure for any species in the galactic concord. Hayes continued. "When we brought your body aboard, we initiated our standard post-mortem analysis. We attempted to thaw your tissues slowly to preserve the neural matrix for a few hours, hoping to extract your final logs. The tall alien leaned in, its 4 black eyes reflecting the blue light of the hologram. But as the temperature rose, your internal systems did not decay. They rebooted." Hayes waved a long, multi-jointed finger, and the hologram zoomed in on a microscopic level. It showed a chaotic, swarming mass of cells. Your heart, a simple, single-chambered muscular pump, began to spasm. Then it established a rhythm. Without external electrical stimulation, it simply decided to resume function. "It's called an autonomic pacemaker," Cole whispered, exhausted. "Sinoa trial node." "It is madness," Reed clicked loudly. "A machine does not restart once its primary power core has frozen solid. But that was only the beginning." Hayes changed the display. The screen now showed a massive, terrifying battle occurring on a microscopic scale. Strange, jagged alien particles were swarming through what looked like a bloodstream, but they were being ruthlessly hunted. Massive amorphous blobs were engulfing the alien particles, dissolving them with brutal efficiency. During the rescue, you were exposed to several ambient strains of microbial life native to our ship, Hayes explained. Because you were assumed dead, we did not place you in a sterile quarantine field. The microbes entered your bloodstream. For my species, an infection of a foreign microbe requires immediate, heavy pharmacological intervention. We have no internal defense. Our immune systems are entirely external and technological. Cole watched the white blood cells hunting the alien bacteria. A faint, cynical smile touched his cracked lips. "Macrophages," he rasped. "White blood cells. They eat the bad stuff. They are autonomous biological hunter-killers," Reed corrected, taking another step back. "They are operating independently of your conscious mind. You harbor trillions of microscopic predators within your own circulatory fluid, and they are currently committing mass genocide against our local flora." Cole let out a short, painful bark of laughter. "Glad I could be of service." "It is not a matter of humor," Hayes said, though the alien's tone held a strange reverence. Your body is a theater of extreme violence. But the most terrifying aspect is not your internal defenses. It is your structural reconstruction. The hologram shifted again, showing a cross-section of Cole's fractured ribs. When our bones break, the limb must be amputated and replaced with a synthetic prosthetic. Once the crystalline structure is compromised, it cannot bear weight. But your skeleton... Hayes trailed off, zooming in on a hairline fracture. Cole watched as microscopic cells clustered around the break. Osteoblasts. They were depositing calcium, bridging the gap, building it back. Your body is weaving the calcium back together, Hayes whispered. It is generating new mass out of the nutrients we are pumping into your intravenous line. The new bone tissue is thicker. It is denser than the surrounding area. You are taking catastrophic damage and using it to reinforce your structural integrity. Scars, Cole said. The effort of talking was draining him, but the absolute bewilderment of the aliens was keeping his mind anchored. Bones heal stronger where they break. Flesh weaves back together. It leaves a mark. We call it scarring. You rebuild yourselves, Reed murmured. The alien dropped its datapad. It hit the floor with a sharp clatter, but the creature didn't even look down. You are broken, and your flesh simply refuses to accept the finality of the fracture. You knit yourselves together in the dark. It's just biology, Cole said, shifting slightly. A sharp pain lanced down his left leg, and he winced, his breath hissing through his teeth. It is defiance, Hayes corrected softly. The doctor looked at Cole not as a patient, but as an anomaly that threatened everything they understood about the universe. Biology is logical. Biology conforms to the laws of thermodynamics. It decays, it expires. What your body is doing is rejecting the natural order of mortality. Your cells are fighting a war against death, and they are winning. Cole stared at the ceiling. The heavy weight of his grief was still there, a cold stone in his gut. But underneath it, a stubborn ember was beginning to glow. He was a human. He was a deep space hauler. He had survived the void. He had survived the freezing dark. He didn't want to lie on this table anymore. He felt exposed, weak, and tired of being analyzed like a bug under a microscope. He wanted to sit up. He needed a drink of real water, not the intravenous chemical slurry they were feeding him. "Turn off the gravity field," Cole commanded. His voice was stronger this time, scraping against the silence of the sterile room. Dr. Hayes blinked its 4 eyes. "Negative. Your muscular tissue has severely atrophied. Your equilibrium is heavily compromised. Removing the stasis field will subject you to a full gravimetric load of 1.0 standard Gs. The pain will be immense. You will likely collapse." I said. Cole grunted, tightening his jaw. "Turn it off." "I cannot comply. It violates standard medical protocol for..." Cole didn't wait. He focused on his right arm. It felt like it was encased in wet concrete, heavily weighed down by the invisible stasis field. He grit his teeth, feeling the muscles in his shoulder scream in protest. He pulled. The heart monitors beside the bed instantly spiked. Alarms began to blare, a chaotic symphony of rapid, high-pitched chimes. "His engine is overloading," Reed screamed, rushing toward the console. "Heart rate is exceeding 140 beats per minute. Adrenaline and cortisol are flooding his system in lethal doses. Human, cease your struggling," Hayes commanded, extending its long arms, though afraid to actually touch him. "You are overriding your pain receptors. You will tear your own reconstructed tissue." Cole roared, a primal guttural sound that tore his throat raw and ripped his arm out of the localized gravity well. The effort tore a fresh line of agony across Cole's chest. He felt something give way in his side, A partially healed rib shifting, perhaps, or a muscle tearing. He didn't care. The cynical, exhausted part of his brain had been entirely hijacked by the oldest, most primitive mechanism in human evolution, the fight-or-flight response. And trapped on an alien medical table with nowhere to fly, his body chose to fight. With his right arm free, he reached across his chest. His fingers, trembling and pale, found the edge of the medical collar, emitting the stasis field around his torso. "Doctor!" Reed shrieked. "He is dismantling the support web. Stop him!" Hayes yelled, but neither alien moved. They stood frozen, their highly evolved logical minds, incapable of processing an organism, deliberately subjecting itself to excruciating pain. Cole grabbed the collar. He squeezed his eyes shut, his jaw locked so tight his teeth ground together, and yanked. The collar snapped off the mounting bracket. The invisible pressure holding him down vanished instantly. Gravity hit him like an anvil. Cole gasped as his full body weight settled onto the hard, unyielding surface of the medical table. Every bruised organ, every cracked bone, every burned inch of skin screamed in unison. His vision whited out, and a wave of nausea rolled violently through his stomach. For a terrifying second, he thought he was going to pass out. The dark edges of unconsciousness crept into his peripheral vision. But then the adrenaline hit the bottom of his stomach and detonated. He forced his eyes open. He was covered in a fine sheen of cold sweat. His chest heaved, pulling in huge, desperate gulps of the sterile, ozone-scented air. "He is leaking!" Reed cried, pointing a trembling, multi-jointed finger at Cole's forehead. "Coolant his thermal regulation is failing. He is expelling water through his dermis to stop himself from internally combusting. It's called sweat." Cole panted, pushing his palms flat against the table. His arms shook violently under his own weight. His biceps screamed. The muscles in his back coiled like rusted springs. Slowly, agonizingly, Cole pushed himself up. The medical bay fell dead silent, save for the frantic, erratic chiming of his heart monitor. Cole sat up. He swung his legs over the edge of the surgical table, his bare feet dangling inches from the pristine, glowing floor. He was wearing nothing but a pair of standard-issue medical briefs they had apparently fabricated for him. His body was a tapestry of horrific violence. Deep purple and yellow bruises covered his ribs. Patches of skin on his shoulders and chest were angry, peeling red from the radiation burns. He breathed, in and out. The pain was a living thing, wrapped around his spine, but it was his pain. It meant he was alive. It meant the void hadn't won. He looked down at his left arm. A thick, clear tube was embedded in his forearm, pumping a glowing, pale blue liquid into his vein. Nutrient slurry. Cole reached over with his right hand, gripped the plastic housing, and pulled it out in one swift motion. No. Hayes gasped, taking a sudden step forward. "You have breached your own circulatory seal. You will bleed out." A thick bead of dark crimson blood welled up from the puncture wound in Cole's arm. It rolled down his skin, a bright, shocking red against his pale flesh. It dripped once, hitting the white floor with a soft pat. Hayes and Reed watched, utterly paralyzed. To them, a puncture in an organism's primary fluid line was a death sentence. Without a biosealant foam or an immediate surgical cauterization, a veil would drain of its vital fluids in minutes. Cole didn't ask for a bandage. He didn't panic. He simply applied pressure with his thumb for a few seconds, holding his breath through a wave of dizziness. When he pulled his thumb away, the bleeding had stopped. The red liquid had congealed, turning into a dark, sticky semi-solid mass that perfectly plugged the hole. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, its black eyes wide, unblinking. It bent down, bringing its face inches from Cole's arm. It stared at the clotted blood. "The fluid," Hayes whispered the translator, capturing a tone of absolute mind-shattering awe. The fluid itself recognized the breach. It altered its own physical state from liquid to solid. It sacrificed its own flow to build a barricade. Your blood, it thinks. Platelets. Cole grunted, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. They clot. It's basic. It is not basic, Hayes breathed. The tall alien slowly backed away. It is a localized miracle. Your flesh heals itself. Your immune system wages autonomous war. Your fluid seals its own wounds. And your mind... Hayes looked up, meeting Cole's exhausted, bloodshot eyes. Your mind overrides catastrophic pain through sheer irrational will. You are a biological impossibility, a creature built entirely out of redundancies and defiance. Cole looked at the two aliens. He was tired. He was grieving. He felt like he had been run over by a freight shuttle. He didn't feel like a miracle. He felt like an underpaid contractor who had just lost his best friends. "Look," Cole said, his voice rough. "I don't know what kind of perfect fragile glass houses you people live in. But where I'm from, dying is easy. Living is the part that takes work. Now, do you have any actual water, or am I going to have to drink that blue crap from the tube?" Specialist Reed didn't answer. The shorter alien was staring at the single drop of blood that had fallen onto the pristine white floor. Slowly, deliberately, Reed's knees buckled. The alien sank to the floor. It crossed its upper set of arms over its chest, and then crossed its lower set of arms over its abdomen. It bowed its elongated head. A low, melodic hum began to vibrate from Reed's mandibles. It wasn't language. It was a rhythmic, oscillating tone. "What is he doing?" Cole asked, frowning. Dr. Hayes looked at Reed, then looked back at Cole. The doctor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound of deep submission. "He is offering reverence," Hayes translated softly. "In our culture, when we encounter a force of nature that cannot be broken, a phenomenon that defies the laws of decay and mortality, we acknowledge its supremacy." Slowly, Dr. Hayes lowered itself to the floor, joining its assistant. The tall alien crossed its forearms and bowed its head, the melodic humming harmonizing with Reed's. Cole sat on the edge of the alien medical table, clad only in his underwear covered in bruises, and his own dried blood, watching two highly advanced extraterrestrial doctors prey to his immune system. He let out a long, slow sigh, the sound echoing in the sterile room. "Man," Cole muttered cynically, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I really just want a glass of water." The low melodic humming of the two veiled doctors continued for a full 60 seconds. Cole sat on the edge of the examination table, his bare legs swinging gently, waiting for the impromptu religious service to conclude. He drummed his fingers against the pristine white composite of the bed. It made a dull, solid sound. "Look," Cole said, pitching his voice just loud enough to cut through the hum. "I appreciate the sentiment. I really do. But my throat feels like I swallowed a handful of fiberglass insulation. Water. Please." Dr. Hayes ceased humming. The tall alien uncrossed its arms and slowly rose, its multi-jointed limbs unfolding with deliberate caution. Specialist Reed, followed through the shorter veil, kept its 4 black eyes locked firmly on the floor. "Water," Hayes repeated. The translator clipped the word, making it sound entirely foreign, despite being in Cole's native English. "You require H2O, pure dihydrogen monoxide. Preferably cold," Cole grunted. Hayes exchanged a long, unreadable look with Reed. The mandibles on both their faces twitched in a complicated rhythm. "We do not consume liquid solvent in such a raw, volatile state," Hayes explained, taking a step toward a recessed console in the wall. "Our hydration needs are met through ambient moisture absorption and synthesized nutrient gels. To ingest unadulterated H2O, It is highly corrosive to our internal mucosal linings. Cole stared at him. You guys don't drink water. It is an industrial coolant, Reed chimed in, still not looking up. We use it to regulate the thermal exchange in the secondary sublight engines. Cole let out a dry, rasping chuckle that ended in a wince as his bruised ribs protested. Great. Well, I'm running a little hot. Get me some coolant. Hayes manipulated the console. A small compartment slid open, revealing a cylindrical flask made of transparent glass-like material. Inside, a clear liquid sloshed. Hayes picked it up gingerly, holding it by the very top edge as if expecting it to explode. The doctor extended the flask toward Cole, stopping an arm's length away. Cole reached out and took it. His hand was shaking. He hadn't realized how completely drained he was until he tried to support the weight of the liquid. It held about a liter. He didn't hesitate. He popped the seal, raised the flask to his lips, and drank. It was lukewarm and tasted faintly of sterile metallic ions, like water left in a tin cup overnight. To Cole, it was the greatest thing he had ever consumed. He didn't sip. He chugged. The water flooded his parched mouth, rushing down his throat, soothing the raw, irritated tissue. He felt the chill of it hit his empty stomach. He drained half the flask in a matter of seconds, pulled it away with a loud gasp for air, and then tilted his head back to finish the rest. He didn't stop until the cylinder was completely empty. A stray drop escaped the corner of his mouth and ran down his chin. He wiped it away with the back of his hand. When he lowered the flask, he found both Hayes and Reed pressed flat against the far wall of the medical bay. "What?" Cole asked, his voice already sounding significantly less gravelly. "You consumed 1.2 liters of pure solvent." Hayes clicked the synthetic voice, trembling. "In 14 seconds." "I was thirsty." "Human coal," Reed said, pointing a trembling digit at the empty flask. "That volume of liquid introduced directly into our core would rupture our primary digestive sac. It would dilute our internal chemical balance to fatal levels. How is your body processing that mass?" "Sweat, mostly," Cole replied, setting the empty flask down on the table. "Look, we're mostly made of water, about 60%. Without it, our organs shut down in a few days. We don't just process it, we run on it." "A machine powered by its own solvent," Hayes muttered, typing furiously into a handheld datapad. "Madness. Absolute biological madness." Cole slid off the examination table. As his bare feet hit the floor, a sharp spike of agony shot up his left leg. He locked his knee, refusing to buckle, though the room spun for a sickening second. The gravity here was low, he estimated, maybe 0.5 or 0.6 standard Earth Gs. It was the only reason he was standing at all. On a full G world, his fractured bones and atrophied muscles would have glued him to the floor. "I need clothes," Cole said, steadying himself with a hand against the wall. "And I need to see whoever is in charge of this ship. I need to know where we are, and if you manage to salvage any of the Demeter's black boxes." Hayes looked at Cole's battered body. "You are in no condition to ambulate. Your structural support framework is compromised." "I'm walking," Cole stated flatly. He pushed off the wall. "You can either find me some pants, or I can walk to your bridge in my underwear. Your call, Doc." They found him a garment. It wasn't pants. It was a thermal containment drape used for biohazardous materials, fashioned into a makeshift robe that tied at the waist. It was a bright, obnoxious caution orange, but it covered his modesty and retained his body heat, so Cole didn't complain. Walking was an exercise in localized torture. Every step sent a jolt through his bruised heels, radiating up into his lower back. But he kept his face impassive. The deep space hauler mentality kicked in. The job has to get done no matter how much your back hurts. Dr. Hayes walked ahead of him, setting a slow, agonizingly cautious pace, while Specialist Reed trailed a safe distance behind. The corridors of the Vial ship were a stark contrast to the grimy utilitarian steel of the Demeter. Everything here was smooth, flowing, and organically shaped. There were no hard right angles. The walls were constructed of a pearlescent, bone-like material that emitted its own soft illumination. It felt less like walking through a spaceship and more like moving through the arteries of a massive, glowing sea creature. "Watch your kinetic output," Hayes warned as they approached a narrow intersection. The structural paneling here is highly sensitive. It is designed to flex and absorb micro-impacts, not withstand blunt force trauma. "I'll try not to bump into anything," Cole grunted, suppressing a cough. As they rounded the corner, Cole's right foot caught the edge of a raised floor junction. It was a minor stumble, the kind of clumsy misstep he made a dozen times a shift in his heavy magnetic boots. To correct his balance, Cole instinctively threw out his right hand, slapping his palm against the curved bulkhead to stop his fall. He didn't hit it hard, he just leaned his weight against it. Crack! The sound was sharp and deafening in the quiet corridor. A spiderweb of deep fissures exploded outward from beneath Cole's palm. The pearlescent material groaned, buckling inward under his hand, leaving a perfectly hand-shaped indentation nearly 2 inches deep in the wall. Cole froze. He pulled his hand back, staring at the shattered bulkhead. Specialist Reed let out a high-pitched, chattering shriek and dove behind a decorative pillar. Dr. Hayes whipped around its 4 black eyes, locking onto the crater in the wall. Cole stammered, looking at his own hand. "I barely touched it, I swear." Hayes walked over to the bulkhead, moving with the terrified caution of a bomb disposal expert. The tall alien reached out, hovering a long, delicate finger over the shattered wall, running a diagnostic scan from its datapad. "The microlattice is completely pulverized," Hayes whispered. The translator conveyed a mixture of horror and profound fascination. "You fractured a Class 4 impact-resistant composite shield with a casual corrective gesture." "I just lost my balance," Cole argued defensively. "What is this ship made of peanut brittle? It is designed to withstand the ambient pressures of deep space and the G-forces of our own acceleration." Hayes snapped, though the alien immediately recoiled, as if realizing snapping at Cole might invite a casual backhand that would vaporize its head. "Our muscular output is a fraction of yours. We do not generate heavy kinetic force. We use tools. We use fields." "Right. Sorry." Cole shoved his hands deep into the pockets of his bright orange robe. "I'll keep my hands to myself." They continued down the corridor, the silence thicker now. Every time Cole's bare foot slapped against the deck plating, he noticed Hayes flinch slightly. They thought he was a walking wrecking ball. Given what just happened, Cole couldn't entirely blame them. The low gravity was amplifying his natural strength, turning a battered, exhausted human into an accidental juggernaut. Eventually, the corridor opened into a massive circular chamber. The bridge. It was a quiet, serene space. A dozen Vial crew members stood at various smooth, elevated consoles. There were no chairs. The crew operated the ship through complex hand gestures over holographic interfaces. At the very front of the room, standing before a massive panoramic viewport that looked out into the endless black of space, was a Veil, adorned in a pale blue biosuit, slightly more ornate than Hayes's grey one. As Cole stepped onto the bridge, all activity ceased. A dozen pairs of black, bulbous eyes locked onto him. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one clicked their mandibles. They stared at the bright orange figure standing in their doorway, covered in dark bruises and radiating a heavy, dense, physical presence. The veil by the window turned slowly. "Captain Brooks," Dr. Hayes said, bowing its head slightly. The anomaly has insisted on leaving the medical bay. I could not physically restrain him without risking catastrophic damage to myself or the equipment." Captain Brooks studied Cole. The alien did not project the same immediate visceral terror as Reed, but the caution was palpable. Brooks took a step forward, keeping a safe distance. "I am the shipmaster of the Ethel Guard." Brooks clicked smoothly the translator, rendering the voice with a commanding, yet gentle cadence. "My medical officer informs me that your body heals itself through cellular warfare, and that your blood turns to stone to seal its own leaks. And now I see you standing defying the gravity that should be crushing your fractured bones." "Just Cole," he said. He didn't bow. He just stood there, tired and broken. "Thanks for pulling me out of the deep freeze, Captain. I owe you my life." "We did not save you, human Cole," Brooks replied quietly. "We merely provided the temperature. You saved yourself." Brooks gestured toward the massive viewport. "You asked for the remnants of your vessel." Cole walked toward the glass. The Veil crew parted before him, like water giving him a wide, terrified berth. He ignored them. His eyes were locked on the starfield outside the ship. A holographic projection shimmered to life in the center of the viewport, overlaying the distant stars. It was a tactical scan of a debris field. Cole stopped a few feet from the glass. The breath hitched in his chest. It was the Demeter, or what was left of it. The massive, blocky mining rig had been sheared completely in half. The heavy titanium superstructures were twisted and mangled like cheap tin foil. Clouds of frozen atmosphere and crushed rock drifted lazily around the wreckage. We scanned the entire debris radius. Brooks said, stepping up beside Cole, though, staying precisely 3 feet away. "Your emergency airlock was the only pressurized module remaining. We found no other biological life signs, not even in stasis. The kinetic impact was absolute." Cole didn't speak. He stared at the jagged edge of the mess hall. He could see the structural beams where he used to sit and play poker with Jenkins. He could see the shattered remnants of the cargo bay where Sarah used to complain about the cold. A heavy, crushing silence fell over him. The adrenaline that had carried him out of the medical bay evaporated, leaving him hollow. His knees suddenly felt weak. He placed a hand flat against the reinforced glass of the viewport to steady himself. This time he was careful not to push. "Gone," Cole whispered to the glass. "Dr. Hayes has monitored your chemical outputs," Captain Brooks observed gently. "Your cortisol and stress hormones are currently flooding your system again. You are experiencing acute psychological distress. It is damaging your neural pathways." "It's called grief," Cole rasped. He closed his eyes, resting his forehead against the cool glass. The image of the wrecked ship burned against the back of his eyelids. "Grief." Brooks repeated, testing the translated word. "A reaction to sudden catastrophic loss. In our species, such a traumatic emotional spike can cause irreversible neural cascading. Our minds fracture just as easily as our bodies under heavy stress." Brooks gestured to a crew member who brought over a small, sleek device that looked like a metallic tuning fork. "We can offer you a somatic override," Brooks offered. "It is a localized neural wipe. We can excise the memory of your vessel's destruction. We can remove the emotional resonance of your lost crewmates. You will know they ceased to function, but you will not feel the grief. It will protect your mind from cracking." Cole turned his head, slowly looking at the captain. He looked at the tuning fork device. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the alien ship's engines. "No," Cole said. Brooks blinked its 4 eyes in confusion. "Human Cole, you do not understand. I am watching your vital signs on the console. You are currently in agony. The emotional pain you are registering is equivalent to physical torture. Why would you choose to endure it when we can simply turn it off?" Cole pushed himself away from the glass. He stood up straight, ignoring the sharp pull of his cracked ribs. He looked directly into the captain's strange, insectoid eyes. "Because they earned it," Cole said softly. His voice was steady, now stripped of the earlier cynicism, left only with a heavy, unyielding sincerity. "Sarah, Jenkins, the captain. They were my friends. My crew." He pointed to his own chest right over his heart. "If you wipe my memory, if you take away the pain of losing them, then it's like they never existed. The pain is the only thing I have left of them. It's the proof that they mattered." Dr. Hayes stepped forward, datapad lowered. "But it is damaging you. You are carrying a psychological weight that provides no survival benefit." "You're wrong, Doc," Cole said, a sad, bitter smile touching his lips. "It does provide a benefit. You said it yourself earlier. My bones break and they heal back thicker. My skin burns and it turns into scar tissue." Cole looked back out at the floating wreckage of his life. "Our minds do the exact same thing," Cole whispered. "We take the hits, we break, we grieve, and then we heal over the cracks. It makes us harder. It makes us survive the next time. You wipe my memory. You take away my armor." The bridge was completely silent. The Vol crew stared at the human in the bright orange robe. They had looked at him as a physical impossibility, a creature of dense muscle, autonomous immune systems, and kinetic violence. But now they saw something far more terrifying. They saw a creature that weaponized its own suffering. Captain Brooks slowly lowered the metallic device. The shipmaster looked at Cole, and then very deliberately crossed its upper arms over its chest and bowed its head. It was the same gesture of reverence Hayes and Reed had performed in the medical bay. One by one, the entire crew on the bridge turned away from their consoles. They faced Cole. They crossed their arms. They bowed their heads. A low, hauntingly beautiful vibrating hum filled the massive chamber, echoing off the glass and the bone-white walls. Cole stood amidst the alien crew, bathed in the starlight of a foreign sector, carrying the ghosts of the Demeter. He didn't ask them to stop humming this time. He just closed his eyes, let the pain wash over him, and allowed his heart to keep beating in the dark. The hum faded slowly, dissipating into the ambient drone of the Ethelguard's environmental systems. The crew returned to their stations. Their movements were noticeably more deliberate, their eyes darting nervously toward the human, standing by the glass. Captain Brooks gestured to a large, circular console in the center of the room. "Human Cole, come here." Cole stepped away from the viewport. The orange fabric of his makeshift robe rustled against his legs. He favored his left side, leaning heavily on his right foot to spare his cracked ribs. The pain was settling back into his joints, a deep, persistent throb. Brooks tapped the console. The holographic debris field vanished, replaced by a sprawling, three-dimensional star chart. Millions of pinpricks of light suspended in the air. "When we retrieved your pod, we extracted the primary navigational drive," Brooks said. The shipmaster manipulated the projection, zooming past clusters of stars, until a single, unremarkable yellow sun filled the center of the display. "Your ship's flight path was logged. We extrapolated your point of origin." The projection zoomed in again. A small blue and green marble rotated slowly in the blue light. Earth. Cole stared at it. It looked so fragile from a distance. Just a pale blue dot suspended in an ocean of lethal radiation. A heavy lump formed in his throat, but he swallowed it down. "We ran a preliminary remote scan of your homeworld's atmospheric and gravimetric composition," Dr. Hayes interjected, stepping up beside Brooks. The tall medical officer held its datapad tightly. We assumed there was an error in the telemetry. We ran it 3 more times. The data remained consistent. Consistent with what Cole asked, resting his uninjured hand on the edge of the console. Madness, Hayes stated flatly. The alien tapped a command, and a list of environmental parameters appeared next to the rotating planet. Atmospheric composition, 78%. Nitrogen, 21%. Oxygen. Mean surface gravity, 1.0 g, 9.8 meters per second squared. Axial tilt, 23.5 degrees severe seasonal temperature fluctuations. Hydrosphere 71%. Liquid solvent coverage. Your atmosphere is composed of 21% pure oxygen. Hayes clicked the mandibles, trembling slightly. Oxygen is a highly volatile reactive element. It is a corrosive agent. It causes structural oxidation. It fuels combustion. You breathe a gas that literally rusts metal. Cole frowned. It's just air. We need it to convert glucose into energy. You are fueling an internal combustion cycle with a corrosive oxidizer, Reed muttered from a nearby station, not even looking up. You are walking engines. Brooks pointed to the gravity readout. The mass of your planet generates a gravitational well nearly double the standard galactic Concord median. The ambient pressure on your skeletal structure every single second of your existence is staggering. If a Viel were to step onto the surface of your world, our long bones would snap under the weight of our own bodies within minutes. That explains why you're all so tall, Cole observed, looking up at the 7-foot aliens, and why I keep breaking your walls. It explains your density, Brooks corrected. Your muscular fibers are coiled like industrial tension cables. Your crystalline bone matrix is packed tightly enough to withstand constant crushing force. Your planet built you to carry heavy loads just to stand upright. Dr. Hayes brought up a sub-menu highlighting the hydrosphere. And the solvent, your world is drowning in it. Entire oceans of volatile liquid teeming with aggressive microscopic bioforms, to say nothing of your macrofauna. We detected large multicellular organisms with specialized bioweapons, venom claws, crushing jaws. Hayes looked at Cole, the 4 black eyes wide with genuine horror. Your world is not a habitat, it is an active crucible, a Class 9 death world. Nothing should survive there. The sheer caloric intake required to maintain your internal body temperature, fight off constant microbial invasion, and resist the crushing gravity is absurd. Cole looked back at the holographic Earth. To them it was a nightmare, a hellscape of crushing gravity, corrosive air, and deadly water. To him it was just home. It was the smell of wet asphalt after a summer rain. It was the taste of cheap coffee. It was the feeling of a cold breeze coming off the harbor. It's not that bad, Cole said quietly. You just adapt. If the gravity is heavy, you build thicker bones. If the air is cold, you shiver to generate heat. The planet tries to kill us, sure, but we're stubborn. We just refuse to die. Brooks lowered its head. A species forged in an atmospheric pressure cooker, engineered for trauma, powered by corrosive gas and an unstable liquid solvent. And now you are out here, in the dark. Before Cole could answer, the floor beneath them violently lurched. The impact didn't make a sound. There was no explosion. It was just a sudden bone-rattling shear of kinetic force that knocked every veil on the bridge entirely off their feet. Cole gripped the edge of the console, his heavy boots locking him to the deck plating. The low gravity that had been a nuisance suddenly saved him. He acted as a human anchor, while the 7-foot aliens were tossed like rag dolls against the smooth bulkheads. The serene blue lighting of the bridge instantly snapped to a harsh, strobing yellow. A grating 2-tone alarm pierced the air. "Report!" Captain Brooks shouted, struggling to push off the floor. The alien's spindly arms shook wildly. A crew member at a tactical station frantically waved its hands over a holographic interface. Kinetic shear. We have crossed the wake of a rogue spatial anomaly, a localized gravity wave. It is the same phenomenon that fractured the human vessel. Structural integrity, Brooks demanded. Primary bulkheads are holding, but Sector 4 is compromised. We have a hull breach in the lower engineering bay. The outer plating is buckling. Cole felt the pressure drop. It wasn't explosive like the Demeter, but his ears popped violently. The air was thinning. Fast. Seal Sector 4, Brooks ordered. Engage emergency blast doors. Automated systems are failing. The tactical officer shrieked. The kinetic wave warped the door tracks. The primary bulkhead in Corridor 4B is jammed. It is only partially closed. Dr. Hayes looked at a secondary monitor. Captain, Technician Miller is still in Corridor 4B. He is trapped between the jammed bulkhead and the breach. The bridge fell into a paralyzed, terrified silence. Cole knew that silence. He had heard it on the Demeter right before the cold took his friends. It was the sound of a crew realizing the math of the universe was entirely against them. Can you manually override the door? Cole barked, stepping away from the console. Brooks looked at him, startled by the sudden commanding tone in the human's voice. The manual override requires extreme physical leverage. The tracks are warped. The pressure differential is already too high. If we open the secondary airlock to reach him, the escaping atmosphere will pull anyone in the corridor out into the void. So you just let him die, Cole snapped. It is the protocol, Brooks said, though the translator caught a tremor of deep shame. We cannot survive the decompression. We do not have the kinetic strength to move the door against the vacuum pressure. To try is to lose more lives. Cole didn't wait to hear the rest. He turned on his heel and sprinted for the bridge exit. He didn't care about the low gravity anymore. He used it. He pushed off the deck plating with explosive force, his heavy leg muscles launching him down the corridor in long, leaping strides. Human Cole, stop! Hayes yelled, its voice echoing down the hall. Your sutures will tear. Your lungs cannot handle the pressure drop. Cole ignored him. He navigated the curving, bone-white corridors purely by following the strobing yellow emergency lights and the sickening pull of venting air. The pressure dropped rapidly as he descended toward Sector 4. The air grew thin and painfully cold. His lungs burned, screaming for the 21% corrosive oxidizer they were used to. He forced himself to take shallow, measured breaths. He rounded the final corner and hit the bulkhead. Corridor 4B was a disaster. The pearlescent paneling was shattered, revealing the dark, twisted metallic skeleton of the ship beneath. At the far end of the hall, a jagged tear in the hull exposed the absolute black of deep space. White vapor, the ship's freezing atmosphere was screaming out into the void. Halfway down the corridor, the massive blast door was stuck. It had slid closed from the ceiling, but caught on a warped floor track, leaving a gap about 2 feet high. On the other side of the gap, gripping a structural support strut with all 4 of its arms, was Technician Miller. The alien's long body was being violently pulled toward the breach. Cole didn't hesitate. He dropped to his stomach and slid under the jammed bulkhead, the rough metal scraping the skin off his back through the thin orange robe. He was immediately hit by the raw, howling force of the vacuum. The noise was deafening. The cold was a physical blow, a solid wall of ice slamming into his chest. His freshly knitted ribs screamed in protest as the atmospheric pressure plummeted, expanding the air inside his lungs. He exhaled forcefully to keep them from rupturing. "Miller!" Cole roared over the deafening rush of air. The alien looked back. Its 4 black eyes were wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. Its grip on the strut was slipping. The veil simply didn't have the muscle mass to hold on. Cole lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the jammed bulkhead with his left hand and extending his right arm toward the technician. "Grab my hand!" Cole screamed. Miller reached out with one trembling upper arm. The alien's fingers brushed Cole's palm. Then the strut Miller was holding gave way with a sharp, metallic snap. The alien was instantly sucked backward toward the black tear in the hull. Cole threw his entire upper body forward, pushing off his back foot. His heavy, dense fingers clamped down around Miller's fragile wrist like a steel vice. The sudden shock of the alien's weight hitting his arm nearly pulled Cole's shoulder out of its socket. He slammed his left boot against the base of the bulkhead, locking his knee, turning his own body into a structural anchor. Crack! Cole felt something give in his chest. A rib fractured earlier, finally snapped entirely. A blinding flash of white-hot agony shot up his spine. He tasted copper in the back of his throat. "Pull!" Cole roared, his voice tearing his vocal cords. He didn't rely on the veil. He used his own raw, earth-forged mass. He gritted his teeth, the muscles in his back and arm bulging under the bright orange fabric. He hauled the 7-foot alien backward, dragging Miller against the howling vacuum. He pulled Miller under the gap in the blast door, shoving the veil to the safe side of the corridor. But Cole was still on the wrong side, and the vacuum was getting stronger as the breach widened. He scrambled back, getting his head and shoulders under the door. He tried to push himself through, but the warped track above him suddenly groaned. The metal shifted. The door dropped another 6 inches, pinning Cole flat against the deck. He was stuck. The door was pressing down on his back, and the vacuum was tearing at his legs. Through the narrow gap, he saw Captain Brooks and Dr. Hayes arrive in the safe corridor. They froze, staring at him, pinned beneath the massive slab of metal. "The door is dropping!" Brooks shouted over the roar of the wind. "The hydraulic safeties are gone. It's going to crush him." Cole felt the immense weight bearing down on his spine. His ribs were screaming. His vision began to narrow the edges, darkening with hypoxia. He was suffocating. The cold was seeping into his bones, freezing his blood. Not again, he thought, the memory of the Demeter flashing behind his eyes. "I am not dying in the dark again." Cole placed his hands flat on the deck beneath his shoulders. He planted his heavy boots against the slick floor. He breathed out the last of his air, clenched his jaw, and pushed. "He is trying to lift it." Hayes gasped, horrified. "The door weighs 3 metric tons. It wasn't a clean lift. It was a brutal, agonizing grind." Cole's triceps shook violently. The veins in his neck bulged against his skin. He channeled every ounce of adrenaline, every microscopic drop of survival instinct his Class 9 death world had bred into his DNA, directly into his arms. With a grinding shriek of tearing metal, the heavy blast door shifted upward. Just 2 inches. It was enough. Cole dug his boots in and threw himself forward, sliding out from under the crushing weight, just as his muscles gave out. The blast door slammed down to the deck with a deafening boom, sealing perfectly. The howling wind vanished. The silence rushed back in. Cole lay on the floor of the safe corridor, gasping for air. His chest heaved violently. The orange fabric of his robe was soaked with dark red blood, seeping from a torn suture on his side. Captain Brooks slowly knelt beside him. The alien shipmaster didn't offer a scanner or a data pad. It simply reached out and rested a trembling 3-fingered hand gently on Cole's shoulder. "You defied the void," Brooks whispered. Cole coughed, spitting a glob of blood onto the pristine white deck. He forced a weak, cynical smile. "Told you, Captain." Cole rasped, his eyes fluttering shut. "We just refused to die." The medical bay felt warmer this time. Or maybe Cole was just getting used to the ambient temperature of the alien ship. He was sitting upright on the examination table. His chest was tightly bound in a thick layer of synthetic biogel bandages that felt wonderfully cold against his inflamed skin. Dr. Hayes stood a few feet away, watching a monitor that displayed Cole's vitals. The erratic, chaotic spikes of adrenaline and cortisol had finally leveled out into a steady, rhythmic pulse. Technician Miller sat on a lower diagnostic bed across the room. The alien had suffered severe atmospheric bruising and thermal shock, but it was alive. Every few minutes, Miller would look over at Cole lightly, click its mandibles and lower its head in quiet reverence. The doors to the medical bay slid open and Captain Brooks entered. The shipmaster carried no data pads, no holographic projectors. It simply walked over and stood at the foot of Cole's bed. "The breach is sealed," Brooks said smoothly. "The kinetic wave has passed. We are returning to our standard navigational heading." "Good," Cole grunted. He reached for the cylindrical flask of water, sitting on the tray beside him. He drank deeply, the cool liquid soothing his raw throat. Brooks watched him drink. "When the bulkhead jammed, my crew executed standard survival protocols. We calculated the variables. The math dictated that Technician Miller was lost. To attempt a rescue was mathematically unsound. It carried a 94% probability of secondary casualties." Cole lowered the flask. "I'm not really good at math." "Clearly," Brooks agreed. The alien tilted its elongated head. "I have studied the data from your home world, Cole. I understand why your physical structure is so dense. I understand why your biology wages autonomous war. It is the only way a species could survive such a hostile environment." Brooks took a slow step closer. "But evolutionary biology dictates that a creature from a death world should be hyper-competitive. It should be aggressive, predatory, and entirely self-serving to ensure its own genetic survival. Yet you threw yourself into a lethal vacuum, fractured your own skeletal structure, and subjected yourself to agonizing physical trauma to save a creature of a different species. A creature you met less than 2 cycles ago." Cole looked down at his calloused hands. The knuckles were bruised, the skin scraped raw from the deck plating. "You guys don't have packs, do you?" Cole asked quietly. "Packs. A group," Cole explained. "A crew, a family. On Earth, thousands of years ago, we were small. We didn't have claws. We didn't have fur to keep us warm. Everything in the dark was bigger, faster, and stronger than us. If we stayed alone, we died." He looked up, meeting the captain's 4 unblinking eyes. "The only way we survived the dark was by standing together. We formed packs. If one of us was cold, we shared the fire. If one of us was attacked, the rest fought back. Empathy isn't a weakness, Captain. It's the ultimate survival trait. It's the reason a fragile, soft-skinned ape managed to conquer a Class 9 death world." Dr. Hayes ceased typing on the console. The tall alien turned around, listening intently. "My crew on the Demeter." Cole continued his voice, dropping to a harsh whisper. "They were my pack. I couldn't save them. I couldn't pull them out of the cold. So when I saw Miller hanging on to that strut..." Cole shrugged, slightly wincing. "It wasn't math. It was instinct. You don't let someone die in the dark if you have the grip strength to pull them out." Captain Brooks stood in absolute silence for a long moment. The sheer sociological weight of the concept seemed to physically press down on the alien. A species bred in the ultimate hostile environment, weaponizing their own empathy to form unbreakable self-sacrificing bonds. "You are not just a biological anomaly, Cole," Brooks finally said, the synthetic translator, capturing a tone of profound respect. "You are an apex predator that chose to be a guardian." Brooks unclasped a small metallic emblem from the collar of its blue biosuit. It was a simple geometric shape, a silver triangle intersecting a circle. The captain stepped forward and placed the emblem gently on the tray next to Cole's water flask. "This is the crest of the Ethelgard," Brooks explained. "When we reach the nearest galactic Concord outpost, I will contact your authorities. We will arrange transport back to your Sol system. But until then, if you are willing, I would be honored to have you consider this ship your new pack." Cole looked at the silver emblem. He thought of the empty, mangled husk of the Demeter, floating light years behind them. He thought of Sarah and Jenkins, and the heavy, crushing silence of the void. He reached out and picked up the crest. The metal was cool against his palm. "I'm a hauler by trade, Captain," Cole said, looking up with a faint, tired smile. "I don't know much about running a fancy ship like this, but if you ever need someone to hold a door open—" Brooks bowed its head, crossing its upper arms over its chest. Dr. Hayes and Technician Miller immediately mirrored the gesture. "We will keep that in mind. Human Cole." Brooks clicked softly. Cole leaned back against the medical bed, the dull throb of his broken ribs a constant grounding rhythm. He was far from Earth, marooned with a crew of giant, fragile aliens who thought water was a poison and sweat was a miracle. But for the first time since the hull of his ship was breached, the cold didn't feel so overwhelming. He closed his eyes, listening to the steady, comforting hum of the engines. He was still here. He was still breathing the air. And in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the universe, that was victory enough. What an incredible journey. Cole proved that human strength isn't just about surviving a death world. It's about the unbreakable empathy that makes us risk everything for a stranger in the dark. If you felt the rush of that vacuum rescue and loved seeing humanity become the guardians of the galaxy, smash that like button, share this story with anyone who needs a reminder of what makes humans so dangerously awesome. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next epic HFY Sci-fi adventure. Let us know your favorite moment in the comments below.